Hey everyone, and welcome back to Timeless. Today we are going to be doing our set review for the main Bloomburrow set. We already did the set review for the special gets and the Courageous Critter bonus cards, and that is in a separate video, and I will point out that video to remind you that this is a very strict scale. In that video, we didn't rate a single card above D tier, and we gave Jace the Mind Sculptor a solid F. We are evaluating these cards for competitive Timeless. Timeless is a very high power level format, and there's a very, very high bar to actually see playability in this format. So if I put a card in F tier, it doesn't mean that it's the worst card ever printed or that you can't have fun with it. You can feel free to try it and have fun or play it in a different format. I just don't think it could possibly make an impact on the metagame of Timeless, and unfortunately, that's going to be well over 90% of cards for most standard sets. So let's start off with not S tier, not A tier, but B tier, because we didn't have any S or A tier cards this time around. The first card I want to bring up is Parting Gust, which is a really cool card because it slots into an existing deck I have. Parting Gust is a card that can either exile your own creature and return it to the battlefield under your control with a +1/+1 counter on it, or it can permanently exile an opponent's creature if you gift them a fish. So it's essentially a 2-mana split card. Either flicker your creature or exile an opponent's creature, and they just get a little 1/1. That's pretty useless. What's awesome is that I actually have a deck that this goes right into. I've been playing a bit of Blood Moon Scam, where we're playing both Fury and Solitude, as well as Blood Moons, and Parting Gust could be a good alternative copy of Ephemerate, because the deck can run Ephemerate, which is very strong for flickering these elementals, but I want more than 4 copies of Ephemerate, so I end up leaning on some mediocre cards like Getaway Glamour and Touch the Spirit Realm. And both of these cards are kind of modal, like Parting Gust, but I think the modes on these other cards are worse. Like Parting Gust is instant speed 2-mana removal for anything, and Touch the Spirit Realm is sorcery speed 3-mana removal. Getaway Glamour is instant speed 3-mana removal, but it doesn't exile. So I think that Parting Gust could slot right into this deck alongside Ephemerate to flicker both the Fury and the Solitude. One thing to keep in mind when you build these sort of scam decks in Timeless, as I've built a couple at this point, is that there's only 3 ways to scam your elementals, one in each color, for only 1 mana, and that's Ephemerate, Essence Flux, and Reanimate. So if you don't have access to multiple of these, you're probably going to want alternative scam effects, which Parting Gust will probably become the second best one in white after Ephemerate. So I think that Parting Gust, it will have a bit of a permanent home in Timeless moving forward. Just one note, the specific deck I showed off was an Obosh deck, so this can't be put into that deck as is, but if you did want to tweak the deck a little bit, change the formula, then you could definitely work Parting Gust into your scam decks. It doesn't even have to be a red-white scam deck. It just be any sort of base white scam deck where you're looking for an additional scam effect beyond Ephemerate. All right. Up next, we have Huskburster Swarm, which is a card that everybody's told me I'm overrating it, but I'm going to put it in B tier as my most anticipated card for the set. And I could totally be wrong here. I could totally be wrong. In my head, I immediately went to compare this to Gurmag Angler and Murktide Regent. Now, I understand that it can't be discounted as quickly as Gurmag Angler. Gurmag Angler can delve and exile any card in your graveyard. However, what's really awesome about this card is that it beats Graveyard Hate. This card still gets discounted even if your opponent dumps a Leyline of the Void or a Rest in Peace or an Unlicensed Curse or any other sort of Graveyard Hate. Now, there's a deck in Timeless right now that is pretty sweet in BO1. It runs all of the flares, Flare of Malice and Flare of Denial. It mills itself. It plays cards like Stitcher Supplier. It'll play cards like Pliers Amalgam, Bloodghast, things that come back from the graveyard for free. It plays really good value pieces like Psychic Frog. And one of the reasons that deck can't go to best of 3 is because people just sideboard in Graveyard Hate and then the deck folds over. But if you have this cool card that will be a 1-mana 6/6 Menace Death Touch, even when the Graveyard Hate is on the battlefield, it makes me a bit more interested. A card like Stitcher Supplier is very, very powerful. It's one of the best enablers ever printed. It was the enabler that made Hogak what it was. But it dies to Graveyard Hate so easily, and whenever I see people register it in Timeless, I try to convince them, hey, maybe you should just play like Deathrite Shaman and not try to self-mill so aggressively because you're just going to lose to Graveyard Hate. However, Huskburster Swarm is a great way to mitigate that angle of losing to Graveyard Hate. It makes it so that your Stitcher Supplier isn't just a 1/1 with no text on it, it's a 1/1 that enables your Huskburster Swarm no matter what. Do I think this is going to be amazing in defining the meta? No, that's why I put it in B tier. I think that there is a chance that it could see play in these decks, especially when these decks already have some really sweet cards that recurred themselves from the graveyard and the ability to run the flares. I think like that deck is legitimately good in best of one, that 8 flare deck. It just falls apart in best of 3, and I do think Huskburster Swarm is a way that this deck can think about beating graveyard hate while also being able to main deck this really strong threat. All right, up next is C tier. The tier list does fall off fast if you didn't watch my last video. Timeless is a very high power level format, as I'm going to remind you for the third time, and it's tough to see play here. So Dewdrop Cure is really interesting. It reminds me of the card Rally the Ranks, which is a card that sees play in Pioneer and occasionally higher power formats, mostly in combo decks like Amalia combo. Return to the Ranks is a really quick way to rebuild your board after a board wipe, and it can return X creatures with mana cost 2 or less from the graveyard to the battlefield. However, it requires a lot of mana to invest into it or a big board state to convoke it out. Dewdrop Cure is a 3 mana card that guarantees gets you 2 creatures with mana value 2 or less. So for 3 mana, you can get 4 mana creatures back. That's already great. But then you can gift a card and you can get up to 6 mana of creatures back. You get a third creature back. So there are actually immediate applications in Timeless. Unfortunately, the applications just aren't in tier 1 decks. There are 2 more fringe creature combo decks that I think have a lot of like substance to them because they fit into Luris shells and they can both just act as Luris decks. And Dewdrop Cure is another really great way for them to have some redundancy. The first is Samwise combo, where if you have a Samwise in play, a Cauldron Familiar, and any sort of sack outlet, this one is Bartholomew, he's Luris compatible, then you can go infinite and drain your opponent infinitely. The second one is Amalia plus Wildgrowth Quacker, which everybody's familiar with from Pioneer. That's a top combo deck in that format right now. So Dewdrop Cure is a great way to get all of these combo pieces back from your graveyard all at once. And it's the most efficient version of this effect I've seen in white. I would be pretty interested in playing this if I was trying to play this deck. I'm not sure exactly how good it would be, but it's definitely really cool to keep in mind if you can get multiple combo pieces back from the graveyard at a time. And remember, if you're getting 3 combo pieces back and you're winning on the spot, it does not matter if you gifted your opponent a card, right? So we'll see if this is good enough to help either Sam combo or Amalia combo rise up a little bit in Timeless. Oh, of course. One more slide that I made that I forgot about. A lot of people have been trying to convince me that you could also just jam this in like Energy or just another fair deck. And honestly, my advice in those sort of decks is always just play another threat. You don't need to play Dewdrop Cure. Play another threat. Put this in your combo decks like Amalia where it can win the game. Don't put this in your energy decks and your other aggro decks where you just happen to have a bunch of cheap threats. All right, up next is Jackdaw Savior, which is a card that like my Discord has already been cooking with. And join the Discord. We have a lot of smart people who love talking about Timeless in there. So Jackdaw Savior, in my opinion, is on the map for Timeless because of the card Null Drifter. Jackdaw Savior says whenever itself or another creature with flying dies, return a creature with lesser mana value from your graveyard to the battlefield. Jackdaw itself has mana value 3, so it can get back a really good value creature like Psychic Frog or Bowmasters when it dies. So this card, yeah, it's the classic dice to Bowmasters. It's got 1 toughness, but hey, it'll get your own Bowmasters back when that happens. But what's really cool is that if you evoke the Null Drifter with your Jackdaw in play, you can get back a 6-drop. Or really any card with mana value 6 or less. And the immediate best target that my Discord was able to think of is Callum, which is a 6-mana creature that can discard itself with a channel ability. So there's definitely something here, and I would like to work on it, especially because of Null Drifter. Null Drifter is what really makes this pop and what really makes me interested. The only issue is that like a lot of this nonsense that we're talking about is also like historically legal, so you need a really good reason to also run this in Timeless. Of course, in Timeless you could run like Reanimate to make your strategy a little bit more consistent, but whether or not this is Timeless power level has yet to be determined. That's why Jackdaw, he's pretty low in the tier list, even though he can objectively do some super powerful things. All right, up next is D tier. Next is Mockingbird. I don't have a home for this card yet, but this is a really powerful clone effect. This is 1 mana, clone up any token or any 1 mana creature. 2 mana, clone a 2 mana creature. Timeless is a format about like really low mana values, so having access to a clone effect that could be this cheap is really freaking awesome. It could be used in some sort of combo deck that does not exist yet, but it also could be used fairly. Whenever there's a problem, it's always these three. Yeah, these three energy cards are very silly in multiples. I know only one of these cards has energy on it, but it's the cards from the energy deck. You could copy your Guided Souls to get extra energy. You can copy your Ocelot Prides to make a stupid amount of cats. You can copy a Johnny to Legend Rule him and Flicker him. I'm not sure if this particular application of the Mockingbird will be good. Probably not, because this energy deck or this fair white aggro deck is not looking to splash blue right now. But there are definitely reasons why you would be really happy to cast Mockingbird for 1 or 2, which makes it a hyper efficient clone effect, and it's definitely something that could see play in Timeless at some point. Up next is Iridescent Vinelasher. So recently on the channel I played Black Devotion and everybody seemed to love it. The deck is super fun, I love it too. And this card, it might slot into this deck as a win condition. I would like to remind everybody that the token copies give devotion, which is so sweet. And this is a unique enough effect that I don't know if it goes in my Black Devotion deck, but it has to go somewhere because this is a win condition. Where in a fetch land format, if you can make a couple copies of this, you can kill your opponent really, really fast. I don't know exactly what the home of this card is going to be, but it is a unique effect. It's a 1-drop for crying out loud. Like, the standards for 1-drops get a lot lower. When you read the text on Guide of Souls, it's not the most busted thing ever printed, but it's a 1-drop that slots into an aggro deck. So if this is a 1-drop that slots into an aggro deck or a combo deck like the Devotion deck, then yeah, it's going to be busted. I don't know if it's going to be good enough. That's why it's in D tier, but this is a really like strong and unique effect. I'm going to repeat the phrase strong and unique effect a lot of times in this video. Wizards did a really good job creating like some really cool and interesting cards that are unique and you could build a deck around them. All right, up next we have Ruthless Negotiation. This card's probably not good enough, which is why it's in D tier, but it does have an immediate use case for me. When you cast this for 1 mana from your hand, your opponent just exiles any card from their hand. It's Raven's Crime. They get to pick the card that they exile from their hand. But what's really cool about this card is that if you flash it back from your graveyard with the 5 mana cost, or by any other means, you draw a card. And the really good means to do that right now is Jarsel. Jund decks have fallen off a little bit, but the play pattern like a month or two ago before Mirror Horizons came out was like Thoughtseize you, play a 2-drop, play Jarsel, flash back the Thoughtseize. The next turn you flash back the 2-drop, and it was a really aggressive and fast play pattern where you just shred your opponent's hand. So now we have a really cool discard spell that when you flash it back with Jarsel, you draw a card. Also, if you flash it back with Dreadhorde Arcanist, you also draw a card. It's in D tier because I don't quite think non-targeted discard is good enough, but hey, it's an application if Jund does come back. All right, up next is 3 Tree City. This is a very powerful card. It is hard to say that Gaia's Cradle at home won't be good. The best application that my Discord has thought of so far is Kozilek's Command. You could make a bunch of little Eldrazi spawns, and then you can go ahead and add a bunch of mana. Or it doesn't have to be Kozilek's Command explicitly. This is just a good way to ramp in an Eldrazi deck. Like, a lot of different cards make little Eldrazi spawns. You could also, of course, play this in bad decks like Elves or Fish. I wouldn't recommend playing Elves. I would not recommend playing Elves in Timeless right now unless you want to lose some games. I don't think this immediately hits the meta, but it's a bit too good of a card to put in F tier. I'm sure eventually somebody will think of something. I think this is the last D tier card for me. This is another card that like I kind of am waffling between D and F tier in my head, but like this is such a cool and unique effect that I do want to talk about it. At the beginning of your upkeep, return another creature you control to its owner's hand. If you do, put a counter on this creature. Otherwise, you may return this creature. So that first trigger is not optional, but the second one is. Well, it's one trigger. The first part of it about returning another creature is not optional, so you will always have to return something else. But if this is your only thing on the battlefield, you don't need to return him. So I'm interested in this because this is actually like a really aggressively statted creature at a 1 mana 2/2, and it can like recur some pretty good and annoying cards in Timeless. Like right now I've been building a bunch of Birthing Ritual decks built around like the cards that you'll see up on the screen, and you could bounce those to your hand and replay them for additional value with Mistbreath Elder. Will this be meta? Probably not. Which is why it's in D tier, and I keep telling you it's like borderline F tier. As I record this, I feel like every card should go down a tier. If I'm being as mean as I was to Jace the Mind Sculptor. However, I think this card is more likely to see play than Mind Sculptor. I'll tell you that right now, just because it's a 1-drop. So it's a 1-drop. It does require significant mana investment to actually get value out of it, but this is a thing that will like scale by itself and actually attack for a pretty surprising amount of damage. Like you could be attacking with 4, 5, 6 damage with this card pretty easily. Um, you just need to be able to constantly reinvest mana to replay your creatures. I'm very curious if somebody figures out a way to break this. This is this phrase again, a very cool and unique and powerful effect that Wizards has put into the set. I really think Wizards did an amazing job with this set, even if like the power level is like a little low and it's not a timeless or a modern power level set. All these cards are cool and unique, and I want to build around them. All right, F tier. I think there's going to be a couple of cards that have a full slide dedicated to them in F tier because they're interesting, and then we're going to get into the lightning round. F tier is more honorable mentions. F means unplayable, boys. All right, up next is the Eddymurk Crab. This is a comparison to Tolarian Terror, except it gains Flash and it loses Ward. A Tolarian Terror is not a playable card in Timeless, but it is a card that will terrorize a format like Pauper, and it can show up occasionally in other places, so maybe with 8 copies of the effect, you can try to jam a deck like this in Timeless. Probably not. Up next, we have Lumra, Bellow of the Woods. I view this as like an alternate Primeval Titan payoff. Primeval Titan decks are out of the meta right now, but Natural Order for Prime Time is still an objectively very, very powerful thing to do. And when you have access to Natural Order, you can put alternative cards to Prime Time into your deck. So one of those alternatives is Cultivator Colossus, and that's one I compared Lumra to. I don't think it's quite as powerful as Cultivator Colossus as an alternate Prime Time, but like it's something. If you have a lot of lands in your graveyard, it will get you a pretty stupid amount of value. If your opponent is playing something like an Ashiok as a hate bear that doesn't let you search your library, then when you play this, it can still get you some value, and when a prime time couldn't. I don't think it makes the cut, but it is an interesting 6 mana creature that could theoretically function in the prime time shell, so it's worth mentioning. Up next, we got Stargaze, another card that could maybe go in the Black Devotion deck. I'm not like sold on it because like it costs life, as everything does in that silly deck. But it is a way to like spend a bunch of black mana if you have it and dig pretty deep into your deck. If it was an instant, not a sorcery, I would like it a little bit more. It's a card. It's here. Okay, lightning round. Blue cards. Into the Floodmaw is cute, but I don't think there's any reason to play a 1 mana bounce spell in Timeless right now. However, if you do end up looking for a 1 mana bounce spell, this is the new best one. Up next is Wishing Well, which is a card that a lot of people have said is so atrocious, but I think in lower powered formats it could actually be fine. I think it compares to a 4 mana Planeswalker. It's a 4 mana sorcery speed play, but it's going to generate you value every single turn. And as long as you have instants in your graveyard, you could do something with it. Again, 4 mana sorcery speed play, not playable and timeless. Worse than Mind Sculptor by a mile, but it's a card that I think is like kind of fun and cute, so I wanted to bring up. Not good enough for Timeless, of course. Thundertrap Trainer, this is like an upgraded Augur of Bolas. You're not looking to play Augur of Bolas in Timeless, but he's such a cute little otter boy. Look at him. And then we have Eluge, the Shoreless Sea. This one's interesting. Like if you're playing like a Spreading Seas fish deck, obviously it wouldn't be literal Morefolk if you're putting this actual fish in the deck. But if you're playing like a Spreading Seas deck that's also playing Harbinger of the Tides, maybe you could play this. It's 4 mana. It's a lot of mana. It also is like relevant text if you hit your own lands with the flood counters. Like it's an interesting card that has a lot of text on it. I just don't think it makes the cut, but I'm putting it on the list as an interesting card that might make that might be worth having fun with. Maybe trying in a different format. All right, in black we got Maha. It feathers knights. This is a card like I almost put higher. I think I originally had it in C or D tier, and then I reread the card. I'm like, okay, this is not good enough to make the cut, but it is a very powerful effect. It has 2 really powerful effects on it. First, ward discard a card is a crazy strong effect. Like that is one of the better ward costs that you can have. So it's very hard to remove this guy. It's always a 2-for-1 when they remove it, and creatures your opponent control have base toughness 1. I think it's called Knight of Sun's Betrayal, where all creatures get like -1/-1, that enchantment. I might be wrong on the name, but like you put those two together for an atrocious jank deck in Arena now. Don't do it in Timeless. Do it in like Historic. Fell. Don't play this in Timeless because it's sorcery speed, but I just want to say, look, WotC did it. They said it couldn't be done. They said 2 mana unconditional destroy creature. It couldn't be done, but they did it. All right, Darkstar Augur, Dark Confidant at home. The offspring ability again like does interest me because like you can make multiple Dark Confidants and they all have devotion. But yeah, Dark Confidant at home for 3 mana is not gonna see play in Timeless, unfortunately. 3 mana is such a high bar. And the thing is, I've tried to play 3 drops in Timeless before. 3 drops that don't have ward or a way to protect themselves or an ETB, namely Archon of Emeria. Archon of Emeria is an all-star card. It sees play in Legacy and Vintage. It is that good. But when I try to play it in Timeless, it just dies to every removal spell in the format, and Darkstar Augur is going to be the exact same case. It is a 3 power, 3 mana flyer, or 3 toughness, 3 mana flyer, just like Archon. And it's just going to die. And then we have Feed the Cycle, which again, another removal spell that it theoretically can go in the toolkit, but I don't think it actually makes the cut over the super premium removal in the format. All right, we're scrolling too much. Green, Keen-Eyed Curator. So this is like a side-graded Scavenging Ooze. Unfortunately, I don't think Scavenging Ooze is good enough for this format. I put it F tier in my sideboard guide. So this card is also going to be F tier. It's a pretty cool card for standard and other formats probably, but not going to be on power level for Timeless, especially with no way to defend itself, even as a 2 mana 3/3. A 3 Tree Scribe. I mean, this is cool. It's a 2 mana 2/3 that says whenever another creature you control leaves the battlefield without dying, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So that could be any sort of flicker effect. We'll trigger this. Any sort of exile effect will trigger this. You know, it's an interesting way to put a bunch of counters on things, but I don't think it makes the cut for Timeless. Paw Patch Recruit is a 1 drop that has so much freaking text on it that it has to be on the list. It's probably not going to have a home in Timeless, but man, that is a lot of text to put on a 1 drop, Watsy. Like, you got to stop trying to print green Ragavan. Vine Reap Mentor is the last green card here. This is not powerful enough for Timeless again, but it reminds me of Blood Type Harvester, and it might be like the Blood Type Harvester of this standard cycle, where it's just a 3 power 2 drop that it makes a junky artifact when it enters and dies. The fact that it triggers when it dies too is also like really, really sweet. And if you're building a sacrifice deck, you're gonna want this. Just not in Timeless, but we're covering our bases and also pointing out cards that I think are just kind of cool design. All right, red cards, my favorite color. Up first, we have Sunspine Lynx, which is like this tremendously high energy card that I would love to play, but it's 4 mana. So it really just doesn't make the cut in Timeless, but I love a card that has the text players can't gain life damage, can't be prevented. It also has that non-basic land hate clause on it, but unfortunately, that's half as much damage as Price of Progress does for twice as much mana. No. Then we have a Flame Cash Gecko, which is really interesting. It like reminds me of Burning Tree Emissary, so potentially used there. It also has an outlet for its own mana. There's something there. There's something there, guys. And then we have these 2 talents, which provide unique effects, in my opinion. Will they be usable in Timeless? Probably not, unless a very specific deck pops up. But Artist Talent allows you to loot every time you cast a non-creature spell and also discounts those spells. So if you're doing like a Ruby Storm style deck, maybe it's something that you can consider. Blacksmith Talent is a free equip, so that if a Hammer Time deck with red showed up in Timeless, then it would absolutely want to play the Blacksmith's Talent. What's cool about both these talents is that they're Luris compatible, while having mana costs in total that are greater than 2. So I'm always looking out for Luris cards that I can sink more mana into. All right, lastly, we have white and colorless. Essence Channeler. This is like a Soul Sisters on crack, or not a Soul Sisters, and a Johnny's Pride Mate on crack. Like, it's kind of crazy. And we are in a Guide of Souls format. It's got 1 toughness, so it dies to a stiff breeze, but like, man, that is a pushed Pride Mate. It's got to see play somewhere, right? It'll probably terrorize standard for a little bit. Then we have Fountain Port, which is going to be way too slow for Timeless, but like that's about as much utility as I've ever seen on a land on Arena. That's probably the most utility I've ever seen on a land on Arena. Like this card does a lot. I think there's an old card trading post that's kind of similar to that. I can't remember the exact name of it. Commander staple. And the last card, Heirloom Epic. I think this is actually probably the most likely to see play out of all of these lightning round F tier cards. And I specifically am interested in this for like the energy decks that can just like spam Ocelot Pride tokens, and sometimes you'll get the mirror match where you're just staring at your opponent. This is a 1 mana artifact that has a 4 mana tap ability, but you can convoke that tap ability. You can use your creatures to pay the 4 mana. So if you have a gunked up board with 4 different tokens, you can just like draw a card for 0 mana, only one mana upfront investment. The thing that kills it for me is activate only as a sorcery, dude. If I could do that on my opponent's end step, it would be actually so good. And I would really think about registering it in my energy deck, but activate as a sorcery, no. But it is a really cool card. Again, +1 to Wizards for all these card designs. Like, they cooked. They made some awesome cards. A bunch of really unique things that, sure, they might not be timeless playable, but hey, I think these cards are really cool. I think they're really awesome. I love the cute little animals in this set as well. So, reminder, if you're the timeless spike, if you're trying to get mythic, you should not be looking to craft a lot of these cards. Most of these cards are fringe. There's only 4 whole cards in the set, including the bonus sheet that I rated above fringe. And those are the only cards that you should really consider playing with if you're trying to win right now. It is possible that a card that I rated lower will go up in the rankings if somebody figures something out. But in my opinion, your Mythic Wild cards are safe after Modern Horizons 3. And what's awesome too is that 3 out of the 4 cards I gave the B and the C here are uncommons. Oh, I'm so happy my wild cards are saved after Modern Horizons. Oh man, I almost went bankrupt. All right, thanks for watching, folks. If you think I forgot a card from the lightning round, just let me know in the comments. If you want to tell me that Mind Sculptor is actually A tier, also feel free to write an essay in the comments. It boosts my YouTube engagement. Thanks.